Turks, Cenk, Uygur. Emma Vigeland with you.
Hello.
All right, Anna's on vacation. We're gonna have some rotating hosts this week. Emma, great to have you. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about you, Cenk? It's good to be here and talking to you.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm rock and roll, sister. So count us lucky. Given all the hard times the folks are going through, thrilled to be healthy and hanging in there.
Yeah, and at least we're not in Florida, so.
Yeah, well, there's that. Right. I used to love going to Florida. I used to love living in Florida. Oh boy. These days, lots and lots of trouble. Although lots and lots of trouble coming out of Florida on most days. All right. So speaking of staying healthy and strong, we've been trying to do that through fundraising. I had an interview with CBS earlier today. It's not going to air till a long time later. But they were basically asking me, how do you guys do it? And I told them, it's the audience. If they are not in favor of what we're doing, that'll cancel us. But if they are, ain't nothing can knock us down. So tyt.com/go. And every day that I scroll through your names and see where you guys live and stuff, it just gives me incredible hope. So let's see where we are with the thermometer real quick. Hey, we passed 40,000. Look, for 2020, and we're only doing this in 2020, we're trying to reach 200,000 a month to keep our voice out there, all of our voices together out there. So we always appreciate it when anybody chips in. tyt.com/go. We appreciate it, guys. All right, and every once in a while we're doing specials because of that campaign, and we're gonna do one soon. We're calling it Hero Day. This is my goofy idea. Who are your heroes in real life? Okay. So it's going to be July 21st, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, tyt.com/live. As you can tell there, John Idarola, Ida Rodriguez, JR Jackson, Anna, and I will all be part of the special. And what I mean by that is I'm not asking you for Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. We get it. I hope those are your heroes. But in your personal life, who helped you out? We'll get your stories. We'll also tell our own stories. And I love these specials because you get to learn more about us. And it's powered by this whole tyt.com/go enterprise. So thank you guys. All right, Emma, let's do our first story.
Let's do it. If you've watched Tucker Carlson's show, you might think this is a little bit racist. And usually that's because writers behind shows like that are racist themselves. So there's a scandal coming out of Fox News with Tucker Carlson's writer. It's juicy and disturbing. So the top writer for Fox News host Tucker Carlson has resigned from his position at the network after racist posts that he allegedly authored surfaced. Blake Neff, who is originally from South Dakota, had allegedly posted offensive material over a number of years on an internet message board called AutoAdmit that often contains bigoted content. The CNN report cites several examples of questionable postings on the site AutoAdmit with bigoted and derogatory comments about women, Black, Asian, and LGBTQ people. Black dudes staying inside playing Call of Duty is probably one of the biggest factors keeping crime down, he reportedly wrote a few weeks ago. He derided a woman for being an Asian mega shrew in posts that were all allegedly, thank you Daily Mail, allegedly like 40 times posted under a pseudonym. Neff stated how he wouldn't get LASIK from an Asian for free in response to an email thread with the subject line, "Would you let a jet black Congo N-word do LASIK eye surgery on you for 50% off?" Obviously all disturbing, but it just goes to show this is the underlying philosophy when Tucker Carlson spews dog whistles or sometimes just straight up whistles on his program, sometimes under the guise of isolationism, protectionism, but usually it's just abject cruelty and bigotry.
So there's a couple of things here that are really eye-catching. And so first off, when he's anonymous, oh my God, the gloves are off. And it's so interesting to see the coded language he uses for Tucker Carlson show, and then the non-coded equivalent of it when he's anonymous in the blogs. Remember, he's the head writer, and he has bragged that whatever Tucker Carlson is reading in the prompter, he wrote, okay? And when you're the head writer, that's largely true. And so when the gloves come off and he's anonymous, he talks about things like white libs and their university-educated pets, referring to African Americans. Now, white libs, I don't care about. Conservatives say that all the time, okay? You're gonna call black people pets? Oof. Second thing that you see throughout is guys viciously racist towards blacks, but that's not all. And I think that the going after Asians is a little telling. So, of course, Asians are not immune from racism. In fact, the Chinese are the only nationality ever banned from America. But these days, a lot of conservatives pretend to be pro-Asian. They say, "Oh, look, we're not racist. You know, the Asians are the model minority. They do well. They work hard. They assimilate. They got names like Steve and Dave and Bob. We like the Asians." No, they don't. And Steve Bannon also had a lot of vitriol towards Asians, and so does this guy. And it's part of the same resentment. The original resentment towards black folks in this country was, hey, now look, a lot of you white folks might be poor, the slave owner would say. You might have nothing, but hey, I'm gonna tell you at least you're better than blacks. And so I'm gonna use your resentment and direct it towards those minorities. Now, as Asians have become successful in this country, by the way, obviously not uniformly so, right? But as a lot of them have become executives at successful companies, et cetera, now that same resentment is weaponized towards Asians. And you see it in the anonymous blog posts. The third thing is, man, he gets super personal with particular women. Okay, and that's another telltale sign. You see it all the time, and you see it with Carlson's writer. And he picks on particular women. That one is not generalized. It's, hey, that woman, and she's an Amazon, and she's this, and she's overweight, and she's that. And then later, he admits that he does not drink much, and he also does not go out with women much, if at all. That's the least surprising thing I have ever heard in my life. Not just because of his awful opinions, but it's that resentment, the resentment. I used to be in charge and women used to desire me and I used to have the best jobs, but now the Asians and the blacks and I don't get as many women, and the resentment is overwhelming as you read the blogs.
It's a part of a larger online toxic culture that I think you and I, Cenk, see daily, and I would say female hosts online see it even more so, especially if you're in a minority category. This 4chan online toxic culture where white men feel like they have a home, and that's kind of Tucker Carlson's show, except on cable news. It's more of a dying breed, but there is an enormous audience for it because Tucker is the #1 show on Fox News at the moment. And you can see that in the ratings.
Yeah, one more thing about the attacks against particular women. The women, when they found out, were like, what? I'm Facebook friends with him, but I'm not that close to him. He's been attacking me for 5 years straight in this weird racist blog I had no idea about. Because he probably wanted to date you and he's so mad that he can't. Right, and so unfortunately, this happens to strong women, especially online, all the time. To your point, Emma, with you, with Anna, with so many of our hosts and other progressives, there's this like, this feeling of inferiority that then breeds the sexism and the racism and all the other things that come along with it, and it's just pouring through Carlson's writer. So. But the thing is, the really important part of the story isn't what he thinks privately. It's that's the same exact guy. It's not like it's a different guy writing the blogs. It's the same guy who wrote those viciously racist and sexist things that also writes Tucker Carlson's script, but he's savvy enough to make it slightly more coded so that resentment and racism and sexism is more easily consumable by the masses. And man, do they love it. It's not just about the writer, it's not just about Tucker Carlson. He's the highest rated show on Fox News. The Fox News audience likes what they're reading there from this guy.
Yeah, it's incel culture, right? And we've seen mass shootings and mass killings perpetuated by that same resentment and sexual frustration. And also it kind of reminds me of Stephen Miller and how he puts coded language into Trump's speeches and policies. But Fox is pretending to be outraged over this. Tucker Carlson himself has made it clear how enough is integral to their writing process, but now Fox is trying to distance themselves from these words, and we don't know what Carlson's going to say tonight on his program, but he plans to address this. Fox News said in an internal memo to employees that it strongly condemns this horrific, racist, misogynistic, and homophobic behavior. Neff's abhorrent conduct on this forum was never divulged to the show or the network until Friday, at which point we swiftly accepted his resignation. Make no mistake, actions such as his cannot and will not be tolerated at any time in any part of our workforce, read the memo from Fox News Media CEO Suzanne Scott and Fox News Media President and Executive Editor Jay Wallace. Neff attended Dartmouth College, a private Ivy League university in Hanover, New Hampshire. An article written about him in an alumni magazine spoke of the supposed influence he had on the show. Anything he's reading off the teleprompter, the first draft was written by me, says Neff. In the past 3.5 years, he has been working on the show. Neff explained that he would initially speak to Carlson each day about what to cover, but said that he shared similar views as the right-wing pundit on many issues. I've gotten used to what he likes and what he thinks about, he said. And let's see if this writing is evident in Tucker's show, because you might see some reflections of those resentments and vile thoughts in Tucker's programming.
To a remarkable degree, federal law enforcement is now driven by political imperatives. Certain kinds of so-called hate crimes top the list of priorities. They'll draw the FBI faster than you could summon the local police to your house during a home invasion, even when, as is so often the case, they turn out to be hoaxes. White supremacy is just that prevalent in America, they tell us. It's everywhere. Except it's not. That's a lie. White supremacy is not ubiquitous in America. It's not a crisis. It's not even a meaningful category. It is incredibly rare. You could easily live your entire life in this country without meeting a single person who believes anything like that. Most of us have lived lives like that. I have. What is a crisis in America, and a growing crisis, is left-wing extremism and violence. This matter is now more popular than either major political party. So don't be surprised when they come for your church. Why wouldn't they? No one is stopping them. This may be a lot of things, this moment we're living through, but it is definitely not about Black lives. And remember that when they come for you, and at this rate, they will. We have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, they tell us, even if it makes our own country poorer and dirtier and more divided. In the year 2000, Hazleton's population was 2% Hispanic. Just 16 years later, Hazleton is majority Hispanic. That's a lot of change. This pace of change makes societies volatile, really volatile, just as ours has become volatile. That's happening all over the country. The culture their parents and grandparents had built evaporated. Overall, this is the least racist country in the history of the world. Millions of Africans want to move here. Many already have. Our last president was black. What are you talking about?
Country on earth was a virulent racist. The guy who wrote white supremacy is a hoax and almost never exists, and that he's never met a white supremacist was a white supremacist. So he, in the blogs, he clearly says that black people are inferior, prone to violence, every racial epithet you could imagine. On George Floyd, he said he's a piece of crap, but he used the other word. George Floyd is a piece of crap with a long criminal record, okay? And then they pretend, we care that George Floyd was killed. Meanwhile, his real opinion is, he was a criminal, he had it coming, like all of them, right? But what white supremacy? I don't see any white supremacy. And he just writes it, and I'm super curious what Tucker Carlson is gonna say. He said he never met a white supremacist his whole life. It turns out his head writer is a white supremacist. So is he going to say, oh, my bad, I didn't know that, my God, I feel awful that I wrote things like the immigrants will not replace us, which is the exact same thing as the Jews will not replace us that the Nazis used. My God, I feel bad saying that white supremacy wasn't real when it turns out it was inside my building and writing my scripts. Or is he gonna be like, whatever, no big deal. So of course, I mean, he called them the N-word. So what? So what? So what? And he thinks Asians and blacks shouldn't have any jobs, and that women should be harassed by random people on the internet and threaten their life. So what? So what? Okay, that's how he normally reacts. I think this time, my guess is he's gonna do something in the middle. He can't say so what because he actually risks getting fired now. Okay, now at the same time, his audience loves the racism, so he can't do a full mea culpa and admit the guy's a full-blown racist and that he was super happy to have him write his scripts with coded language of that same racism. So he's probably gonna pretend like, oh golly gee, was he? I didn't know. But I would change a lot of the scripts to be slightly less racist. I mean, I called them poor and dirty and they ruined the country, but we wouldn't call them the N-word or other forbidden magic words. So not guilty. And probably that'll be plenty enough for Fox executives who like the money that it brings in, and plenty good enough for the people who know that they're racist but don't want to admit it.
I want a screen grab of whatever you were doing there, just for my own purposes, on your face like that.
Don't worry, it'll be a meme soon enough.
All right, let's move on to our next story.
Okay, let's actually take a quick break. So we got these Betsy DeVos, amazing story, as you all know. I got we have so many great stories today in today's show, including Mick Mulvaney, the former chief of staff for Donald Trump, throwing Trump under the bus. So we'll be right back. And in the meanwhile, tyt.com/go.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of On the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
I'm back on the Young Turks, Cenk, Uygur, and Emma Vigeland, or the Vig, as some are now apparently calling her. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, it's kind of interesting implications. Anyway, so first off, shout out to our sponsor, Aspiration. They don't put any of your money into oil drilling or pipelines or any of that stuff, so you have peace of mind with where your money is, good rates. Save money, save the planet. I like that slogan. And they plant 10 trees when you sign up. So aspiration.com/TYT. And then I want to go to our members. Vicky says, thank you, Cenk, for bringing in Dolores into the conversation, referring to Dolores Huerta, who I interviewed, that some of you guys saw right before the show started. Now the interviews are at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you're checking those out. I'm thrilled that within the span of about 10 days, we had two living legends on, Reverend William Barber and Dolores Huerta. So those are great interviews. And if you missed them, either become a member or go to our website, tyt.com/go TYT.com/join. Okay. Anyway, Vicky continues. Tomorrow in Maine, we hold our primary, and I'm hoping the progressive candidate Betsy Sweet gets the vote. There was a retirement party held in Bangor on Sunday for Susan Collins. Susan was upset, however, that her invitation must have gotten lost in the mail. Okay, I love that. I hope we do retire Susan Collins. Betsy Sweet is a Justice Democrat, and so if you can get out there in Maine and vote for her, that would be great. See how she does tomorrow. Sexy Speed Racer says, the first day watching TYT wearing my brand new TYT shirt. Thanks to everyone at Shop TYT and for the Member Appreciation Week discount. I love that you took advantage of that. Still, the masks are getting rave reviews. So check out shoptyt.com. Also, of course, the shirts and everything else. All right, and then one more from the members. Cynthia writes in, please don't forget to mention that a lot of what this writer wrote, Trump later echoes in his speeches and in his interviews. A lot of Fox News, of what Fox News says later ends up in a speech or a tweet. If I'm not mistaken, CNN did a story on this. That's right, we've also done stories on that. And in this case, you actually see Neff, Tucker's writer, referring to African countries as S-holes. Then you see it jump to Trump. And so you're very right about that, Cynthia, and I love you guys being part of the show. TYT.com/join, or hit the join button below on YouTube, and that gets you membership as well. And then I just got to read a couple about Emma from YouTube Super Chat. Probot Video says, Uygur and the Vig. So glad to see Anna getting a well-deserved vacation and Emma hosting the main show. Next, give John a week off and let Emma host TDR Live. I like how people are like, moving John along and stuff.
Sure. Just give me more work. It's all good.
Ariel Apu. Sorry, Ariel, it's hard to pronounce your name as it's hard to pronounce mine. Anyway, writes, a thumbs up if you think the chat needs an Emma Vigeland emoji. Okay, I like it. Down, yeah. YouTube channel membership. If you get that, you get the emojis. And last one is a serious point. Well, it's kind of a funny serious point. Harish Ramaya writes in, Tucker lived his whole life never meeting his racist head writer. I like it a lot. All right, thank you guys for using YouTube Super Chat and for helping the show. Emma, what's next?
Awesome. Betsy DeVos face planted on national television, not once, but twice over the weekend on two separate shows. First, she started off on CNN.
Can you assure students, teachers, parents that they will not get coronavirus because they're going back to school?
Well, the key is that kids have to get back to school. And we know there are going to be hot spots, and those need to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. But the rule should be that kids go back to school this fall.
Madam Secretary, I don't think anybody disagrees with that. I mean, I'm a parent. I want my school-age child to go back to school as much as you are saying you want for everybody. But the question is, can it happen safely? So can you, by saying what you just said, also assure parents, students, children, everybody who's there, that they're going to be able to do so safely?
Well, we know that children get the virus at a far lower rate than any other part of the population. And again, there is nothing in the data that would suggest that kids being back in school is dangerous to them.
There actually is a good amount of data from the government itself, and I'll get to that in a second, but she was also asked about how to protect vulnerable teachers and staff. She also didn't have an answer for that.
A new Kaiser study this week found that almost 1.5 million teachers, 1 in 4 nationwide, are at high risk of serious illness from coronavirus because of age or underlying conditions. And we just learned this morning that 3 teachers in Arizona contracted COVID and 1 of them died. So if teachers don't feel comfortable going into the classroom, should they go in or stay home?
Well, first of all, I feel for a teacher that has a vulnerability or an underlying condition and know that this is something that is concerning. But the reality is that there are ways for those teachers to be able to continue to do what they do. And every district, every state has the real opportunity to work with and figure out the best scenario for those teachers. Maybe younger teachers are in the classroom and an older teacher, that's something for them to work out with their local district. But again, that's the exception, not the rule. The rule needs to be schools need to get open. Kids need to go back to school. They need to be learning. Teachers want to be there. They want to be in the classroom with their kids.
So Betsy, she has that robot going back to the same talking point bug, but she's not a very intelligent robot. She doesn't seem to have coherent answers for when reporters ask her questions. There are guidelines for how we can educate our kids. The CDC has put them out, but the Trump administration is deliberately flouting them because, I don't know, Betsy DeVos has some investment in for-profit schools and charter schools. Maybe she has an incentive or a reasoning behind why she wants to put kids back to school. But they're not listening to the CDC, and that's the whole point. Internal documents from the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention warn that fully reopening K-12 schools and universities would be the highest risk for the spread of coronavirus, according to a New York Times report, as President Donald Trump and his administration push for students and teachers to return in person to classrooms. The 69-page document obtained by the Times, marked for internal use only, was among materials for federal public health response teams deployed to coronavirus hotspots to help local public health officials handle the outbreak, the newspaper reported. The document was circulated this week, the Times reported, as Trump slammed the CDC guidelines around reopening schools, and he, Vice President Mike Pence, and Education Secretary Betsy DeVos increased their pressure on schools to fully reopen by the fall. So this is the administration not looking to listen to scientists and pushing forward because they want to pretend the pandemic's over, and they also might want to help out charter schools and for-profit colleges and universities on the side too.
So there are a couple of issues here. So first off, Betsy DeVos says, well, there's no evidence that it could be a problem if we reopen the schools. That's not remotely true. Israel had a massive outbreak in schools, Sweden had problems, etc. So no, kids definitely get the disease. Are they less affected? Yes, that's true. But their parents and their grandparents, and especially for people who are poor and middle class, there's a lot of multi-generation households are affected very poorly by that. So some kids have actually died. So recently a 5-year-old died, and that's very rare, but it happens more often with kids who have pre-existing conditions. So first point that kids are not affected is not true, okay? Are they less likely to die? Yes, but they're definitely affected. All being in the school definitely increases their chance of getting it and spreading it. Second, most important point is, if you're an older teacher or you've got pre-existing conditions, for some of you, it's a potential death sentence. And so Dana Bash asked about that, and you saw her answer, Betsy DeVos's answer. She went around and around in a circle, and it's basically said that's up to the local districts. Now, what she didn't tell you, and what they talked about later, is DeVos is saying, if you don't reopen the schools, we're gonna cut your funding. So apparently it's not up to the local districts. You're saying you're gonna cut their funding unless they send those teachers back into that incredibly dangerous situation. Look, kids are already a bacteria factory, but in coronavirus, and you think they're all gonna keep their masks on? And what happens when they go to eat lunch and when they go to eat snacks or they have recess, etc.? And they're all packed into the same rooms, and you have the air conditioning system and the heating systems, etc., recirculating the air. So the teachers and the people at home are the ones we're most worried about. And she disingenuously said, "Oh, it doesn't affect the kids much, so let's go back to the schools." And then the second part of this is, why are they doing it? So Emma gave you a couple of potential reasons, but the main reason is they think, oh, people are not going back to work because they don't have daycare, and so they don't know what to do with their kids, so they can't go back to work. First of all, I would then say, how about daycare? How about the US provides daycare like all other developed countries? No, that would actually help poor and middle class people. Okay, and that would help working people. We're not going to do that. Okay, so, but they had the whole thing wrong in the first place. It's not that people are like, you know what? In these highly volatile times when 40 million people have been let go, I'm going to choose not to work. No, they were fired. They were fired or laid off or furloughed. So it's not like they chose any of this, you knuckleheads. And so they misunderstand the whole thing. You could put every kid back in school and you're still gonna have the same number of people out of work. They just keep thinking the American people are bums. And since 20 to 40 million of them are unemployed, they must be lazy. You idiots, they were fired.
I'm muted, I'm sorry. I think for me, the biggest point that sticks out is just that this is a part of Trump's marketing campaign. So pretending like everything is better is of the highest priority. But the problem for him is that all of the people who are convincing at that marketing, they're already gone. They've already fled the ship. They've already said, I'm not staying on this sinking ship anymore. And so you have Betsy DeVos making a fool out of herself on cable shows, which she also did on Chris Wallace's program, and went so far as to threaten federal funds, as Cenk alluded to.
We know, again, from the data that kids don't get this virus the same way adults do. And so, again, the
do we know about how they spread the virus? Because I've been told the science there isn't so clear, Secretary. How they spread the virus, conceivably to their parents, to their grandparents, to teachers in the school, to custodians in the school. Do we know that?
Well, that is something that is obviously continuing to be looked at and studied. And there's, again, a lot of data that suggests that kids are not spreaders. But the point is that kids have got to get back to school, and we can do that safely.
So when she alluded to, in that interview, going so far as to withhold funds from the states, and Cenk talked about that earlier, she can't do that. Trump can't do that. Congress has the power of the purse, and the president is unable to do that without their permission. Because the president doesn't have Congress's fiscal powers, any effort by the Trump administration to tie already approved funding to specific actions would likely end up in court. For the next round of funding, the Democratic-controlled House is unlikely to agree to target it only to reopen schools. Of course, they're very unlikely to do that. They would never allow Trump to do that for good reason, because it's psychotic and only meant to make Trump look better for his re-election effort. And it doesn't matter how many bodies are piled up along the way. This is a part of Trump Incorporated, the golden bold lettering on his the skyscrapers. That's all what it is. It's the appearance of things getting better without them actually getting better. Trump's hoping that they can appear that way long enough for him to win a re-election bid, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah, so she said there's some evidence that children can't spread the disease. Not true. I don't know where the hell she got that from. And then she said, well, we could reopen the schools safely. Well, the CDC gave you guidelines for how to reopen them safely, and you threw them in the trash and made sure that people couldn't see them, as Emma explained earlier in the story. So that's not your goal at all, so stop lying about it. And then the portion of the budget that they control for schools is only 10%. 90% of the budgets for schools are controlled at state and local levels. The 10% that comes from the federal government is supposed to go towards low-income kids and disabled kids. So the only thing Trump could do is viciously cut funding for disabled kids and low-income kids. And even then it would be unconstitutional, but to be fair, that's never stopped him before. And in the case of Ukraine, for example, he couldn't constitutionally hold up the funding that the Congress had already appropriated, but he held it up anyway. Now, to be fair to Trump, it turns out Republican senators will let him break any law and violate any part of the Constitution he likes. So if he did act unconstitutionally by holding up money for those kids, the Republican senators would definitely let him get away with it.
As is their way. Shall we move on to Trump trying to smear Fauci in public now? That's fun.
Okay, let's do it.
So the White House's campaign against Dr. Fauci has turned from a whisper campaign to a smear campaign fairly quickly. So over the weekend, it was revealed that the White House sent out a statement to multiple media outlets trying to discredit Dr. Anthony Fauci, one of the top members of the White House's own coronavirus task force. In a statement Saturday, a White House official told CNN that several White House officials are concerned about the number of times Dr. Fauci has been wrong on things. The official went on to provide a lengthy list of examples citing Dr. Fauci's comments early in the pandemic and linking to past interviews. These bullet points, which resembled opposition research on a political opponent, included Fauci downplaying the virus early on, and a quote from March when Fauci said, "People should not be walking around with masks," among other comments. Not included were previous statements from the Surgeon General urging people not to buy masks, or an acknowledgement of the president's own false claims and misstatements about the virus. Fauci's public sidelining has been notable. He's been making less frequent media appearances, and just last week, one Sunday show said their attempts to book him haven't been approved for months, while the president himself has made it clear he's at odds with Fauci, but recent reports have indicated that Fauci has been privately sidelined as well. Fauci no longer briefs Trump and is never in the Oval Office anymore, said a senior administration official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss internal deliberations. Fauci last spoke to the president during the first week of June, according to a president with knowledge of Trump's calendar. In a burst of early morning online activity, Trump retweeted messages from the politically conservative former game show personality Chuck Woolery, who serves stints hosting Wheel of Fortune and Love Connection, which lamented the most outrageous lies being spread about the coronavirus pandemic. Everyone is lying. The CDC, media, Democrats, our doctors, not all but most that we are told to trust. I think it's all about the election and keeping the economy from coming back, which is about the election. I'm sick of it, Woolery wrote in a tweet shared by the president. Trump also retweeted a message from Mark Young, Woolery's co-host on his Blunt Force Truth podcast, which asked, "So based on Dr. Fauci and the Democrats, I will need an ID card to go shopping, but not to vote?" he asked. So just an example of the high-minded ideas, the high levels of ideas that Donald Trump is tweeting out. Maybe he turned up the dial of ideas that Dave Rubin keeps in his house. So obviously Trump's trying to discredit Fauci so that he can pretend coronavirus is over, even as it's peaking in many states throughout the country and people are dying, deaths are ramping up. Being anti-science and allowing more people to die, well, as Lord Farquaad said in Shrek, some of you may die, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. That's kind of Trump's philosophy when it comes to COVID-19.
People have compared him to a lot of things, but Lord Farquaad is a new one. Nice job, Emma. So will the dragon eat him later? All right.
Let's see.
Yeah, cross your fingers. Let's break this down a little bit more. So if you notice, Chuck Woolery went after doctors too, and Trump retweeted that. So we're now past attacking government officials, attacking the media, attacking scientists. We're onto the doctors. Yeah, it's likely the doctors' fault that we have the worst coronavirus cases in the world. No, the doctors are the ones trying to save your lives. But look, there's nothing the cult won't believe. Can they get them to stop going to doctors? It's possible. I mean, one guy reportedly said on his deathbed, his last words were, "I thought it was a hoax," when he passed away from coronavirus. So then if you notice, he actually went after the CDC too. Trump acts like he's a guy who doesn't realize he's in the government and in fact leads the government. So if you're dissatisfied with the CDC guidelines, you could have talked to them before they published them because you're the president and they report into you. But you never do your homework, so you had no idea what their guidelines was. In the middle of the worst pandemic of our lifetimes, you never bothered to talk to the CDC about what guidelines they were going to put out for all of our health. So
but that makes him feel bad, Cenk. That doesn't make him feel warm and fuzzy inside about his reelection prospects. And do people realize Fauci doesn't have any real power? And that's evident every day by the fact that Trump doesn't listen to him. So he's just an advisor. When Ebola was ravaging throughout the world, Obama took his advice and we saw what happened. Trump is not taking his advice. Obviously, coronavirus is way more contagious than Ebola and other diseases in the past, but we're seeing what's happened there. All he does is advise. So these conspiracy theories about him, just because he's the most public scientific face behind COVID-19 and the information that's coming out about it, it's just absurd. And all media creations and online chatter that Trump feeds into on a regular basis as the president of the United States. And that trickles down and discredits all the other scientists and doctors, just like what he's retweeting there, the point that Cenk made. It's deeply dangerous stuff and sets a terrible precedent.
So Fauci now is getting clearer and clearer with, no, this is still part of the first wave. We're in a lot of trouble. Cases could easily go up to 100,000 a day. When he said that, the right wing was like, that's outrageous. That's never gonna happen. We're already at 60,000 cases a day. Worst in the world. It never let down. Florida right now has over 15,000 cases a day just by itself. It's the most that any state has had since the beginning of the epidemic. Worse than that, it's now worse than a lot of countries that have a much bigger population than Florida, including Spain and Italy, some of the hardest hit countries. Florida is worse off today than they were. So it's just an absolute epic disaster. And I think the reason that Fauci's pointing it out more and more aggressively is in the past, he was partly holding his powder dry because he thought, well, at least Trump is listening to me and I can get through to him and I can influence him to do the right things. So it's worth, balancing these interests out. But now he hasn't talked to Trump since June 2nd. So since he's got no access to Trump, and he's realized what everyone in the Trump administration eventually realizes, which is that he won't listen. So we had a quote from last week with someone who's very conservative inside the White House who said, he won't read a memo, and when you start telling him something, he starts talking over you. So there's literally no way to get him information. And so now Fauci likely thinks, then I might as well inform the American people to the best of my ability how disastrous this is, because they've got to wear the mask and we've got to be careful. This thing is out of control.
Yeah, and lastly, besides the hardcore Trumpies, this is getting through how bad it is, because no amount of statue focus or culture war stuff or race baiting can allow Americans to escape from their daily reality, which is that they wake up and they don't have a job. They wake up or they're in quarantine. They wake up and their grandma is in the hospital with COVID-19. They're in debt, credit card debt. They can't get a job, etc. They can't pay their rent. These are daily realities for people. And so Trump can't obfuscate and change the conversation when you wake up and you go to sleep and it's the first and last thing that you're thinking about. And so that's why he's failing so miserably at this marketing attempt, because this is such a colossal disaster that everyone's facing every day that you can't change it. And by the way, one last point. It's not a coincidence that Brazil and the United States, led by two far-right, science-denying lunatics in Jair Bolsonaro and Trump, are leading the world in coronavirus cases. Not a coincidence.
Right now, US and Brazil combined have more cases than the rest of the world combined. Facts matter. #science is real.
All right, we are going to go to break and some more stories for you when we get back.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Emma with you guys. Let me read your comments as quickly as I can. First, the members. Luna Danya asks, still don't know who's worse, Betsy or her brother, Eric Prince. I can't believe Betsy's made a run at it, but Eric Prince, in my opinion, is worse. Effecto says, someone asked Ms. DeVos if she thinks armed guards at a school will protect schools from COVID-infected bears. I like the way you combine 2 different stories there. Nice job. Meg says they're going to reopen the schools no matter what we think or want. They need to put the kids somewhere so they can squeeze every ounce of productivity out of their parents. This is capitalism. TYT.com/join to become a member and have your comments read more often. Dango Bengal on YouTube Super Chat says, US base in Okinawa has a COVID-19 outbreak. That's right. And the Japanese are now wondering if, what to do with us because Americans won't listen to any rules. And so wherever we are, more outbreaks happen. So we're gonna get banned all across the world. Aaron Graham says, Betsy DeVos is Cruella de Vil in real life. That's a good analogy. Klaus M54 says, TYT contributed hugely to moving me from center right to center left. Greetings from Germany. Thank you and press on. Thank you, Klaus. Really appreciate it. TYT.com/go to help us press on. And last one, Charles Massey says, all I heard DeVos say was, get back to work, get me my money. Also, unfortunately, accurate. All right, Emma, you're up.
So have you ever wondered what would happen when really stupid people watch Game of Thrones and then take all the wrong lessons from it? Well, that's the Trump administration in a nutshell. President Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, has told several White House staffers he's fed specific nuggets of information to suspected leakers to see if they pass them on to reporters, a trap that would confirm his suspicions. Now, you're wondering, how do we know about this information? Well, it's because it was leaked to reporters, which is just amazing. The Trump administration is filled with people who despise their careers and their lives and are miserable. Meadows told pretty much everyone about his secret Tyrion-esque plan, except he doesn't know how to be intelligent in any way, shape, or form. Multiple officials told Axios that Meadows has been unusually vocal about his tactics. So far, he's caught only one person for a minor leak. When you're vocal about your super secret leak plan where you feed specific information to other people to try to weed them out, that might defeat the purpose. I don't know.
Okay, 2 things about this. First of all, it's Kellyanne Conway. Okay, it's so obvious. Second of all, it's Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. They do a lot of leaking to undermine their enemies in the White House. And the reason you can't catch the leakers is you can't go to the president and say it's your daughter doing the leaking. And the third person who does the most leaking is Donald Trump. So in other stories, it's been reported that Donald Trump at night calls a bunch of his Yahoo friends like, hey, you'll never believe what we did. And then they go and tell the press. And so you can't tell the president you're the idiot who's accidentally leaking all the information, okay? But it's just a ship of fools. So Mark Meadows comes in, he goes, I got a great plan full of leakers. I'm gonna tell all you people who are potential leakers that I'm gonna target you one by one with false information. Now don't tell anybody about my secret plan. Oh, really, how can anybody be that dumb? And well, maybe Trump has found the perfect chief of staff for him.
Well, the thing about all these Trump administration officials too is I could just see them being so susceptible to flattery more than most people. Like a reporter just kind of cozies up to them and makes friends with them, and they're like, oh, a friend. We don't have those in the Trump administration. All we do is stab each other in the back, and that's a rule of thumb. And that's part of maybe why Mark Meadows doesn't want to be chief of staff for a long time in the Trump administration. There's been a lot of turnover, way more than other presidential administrations in the past. He doesn't think he's going to stick around very long. 3.5 months in, he has told people he's struggling with the chief's job, and that if Trump wins re-election, he'll stay in the role only for an additional year, if that long. Look at what's happened on Meadows' watch: the walk to Lafayette Square, the complete mishandling of the COVID-19 crisis, the defense of the Confederate flag, and the botched handling of the intelligence on the Russian bounties on US soldiers, alleged. We could go on and on. It has been one of the worst stretches of the Trump presidency, says Chris Whipple in Politico. So my argument would be, when have Trump chiefs of staff, there we go, not presided over disasters? He's no different, but it's been a rough 2020, and that's directly because of the common denominator, Donald Trump.
To which I say, of course. Look, those 4 chiefs of staff are all different kinds of idiots, but obviously the one person who remains the same is Donald Trump. So they say, oh, Mark Meadows, I can't believe how you bungled COVID-19 in the protests. But Mark Meadows didn't do it, Trump did. So everybody's advising, don't keep saying positive things about the Confederate flag, but they can't tackle the guy. He's like, I love the Confederate flag and everything that it stood for, right? Like, don't tweet out white power. And he's like, he not only tweeted out white power, he went on a golf course and they couldn't catch him for hours. And then they turn around and blame Mark Meadows, right? And so Meadows is like, what do you want me to do? The guy's a total idiot and he won't listen to anyone. Exactly, Mark. That's why we told you that there's no winning in that job. But you were so arrogant and you thought, oh, I'm the one guy who's gonna get Donald Trump under control. No, the liberal media is wrong. He's not an idiot. He's really smart, and I'm really smart. We're gonna come up with smart strategies together. How'd that work out for you, Mark? 3.5 months in, he's like, I gotta go. I gotta get out of here.
He's crying uncle, because this is what we've seen throughout the Trump administration. There is that arrogance, but there's also the desire to further one's career. White House chief of staff is kind of a big deal, although it might be a black mark on your record when Trump goes down in history. Just going back in time, we had Reince Priebus, who was the chief of staff for 192 days. John Kelly, 1 year, 154 days. That's actually pretty long, surprising. Mick Mulvaney, 1 year and 86 days. And Mark Meadows, 104 days. So basically 1 per year. That's not usually how it goes down. But of course, it's an administration rife with turmoil and personal embarrassment for working for someone like that. Even within Republican circles, they've got to be embarrassed.
Now, having said that, he gets one last piece of criticism, and it's from conservatives. And what are they saying? They're saying that Mark Meadows has not led to arresting enough political opponents. They say he should have arrested thousands of people given the opportunity of the protests. Oh my God, there is no end to this evil. There is no bottom to this barrel. All right, post-game's amazing, including a former chief of staff turning on Donald Trump. TYT.com/join or hit the join button below. We'll see you there in a minute.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.